Let's kick off by talking about Liz Kendall. She's the Work and Pensions Secretary, doing very nicely for herself. She shares a very posh mansion home in Notting Hill, very exclusive district of West London, very expensive, full of very millionaires. She shares a £4 million home with her financier husband. His name is James Ind. She gets £160,000 a year. He presumably is not badly off. They live in a £4 million Notting Hill mansion. And last year, Liz Kendall, she got you and me to pay for her heating bill in her £4 million Notting Hill mansion. She claimed to heat her home £3,182 from the taxpayer of this country. So that's nice. But when she was in opposition, she actually declared that if you got rid of the winter fuel allowance, it could lead to 4,000 old folk dying. Well, now she is responsible for bringing in the axing of the winter fuel allowance, 300 quid to help the old folk through the cold months, pay for their heating bills. Well, they can't afford it, but she can, because you and me are paying for it. And she doesn't need it because she earns £160,000 a year. Her husband's a financier and they live in a £4 million house, and we're paying for her heating bill. I don't know about you, but that makes me slightly angry. Let's talk to the excellent political correspondent at The Spectator, James Heal. Welcome, James.
Evening, Kevin.
Yeah, I'm afraid Ms Kendall was nailed all over the front page of the Mail on Sunday yesterday. And this is the kind of syndrome that the British electorate will not, up with which the British electorate will not put. They hate this sort of thing. And just looking at the details, that is all wrong, isn't it? You know, a 160 grand a year cabinet secretary, Work and Pension Secretary, living in a £4 million mansion in exclusive Notting Hill, claiming £3,182 to heat that mansion, while pensioners are going cold. That is not a good look, is it?
Well, it's certainly not, and it's good to see that Etonian bankers have some use for the Labour cabinet ministers, even if they may not like business themselves. Look, this is a terrible look, as you say, and of course, I was so struck by the average monthly heating bills, which were £250 a month over this whole, I think, 14-month period. You know, the average British family uses £150 a month for a house, and that's over, they're living in that 7 days a week. This is a second home with which she was staying, we believe, only 2 or 3 days at the most, and yet she really was running up a bill on her own more than the average British family get every single month. So it's slightly baffling, and I wonder how she'd be claiming that.
And, of course, well, presumably she was just turning on the heating, turning it right up with gay abandon, because she knew she didn't have to pay for it. We would be footing the bill. The taxpayer would be footing the bill. You might have thought, James, that an astute politician might have seen this trap. I mean, Nigel Farage and various other MPs today, various other politicians saying, I would never have claimed for my heating, given the circumstances, particularly in the light of the winter fuel decision. You'd have thought that Liz might have seen the problems ahead with this.
Absolutely. And I think the danger is, of course, is that she merely goes around echoing the defence that a lot of politicians tried 15 years ago when it was the expenses scandal. Back then, you had a lot of MPs saying, well, look, we're just following the rules. We've done nothing wrong. We've only, followed the rules, etc. But of course, it is a terrible look to be having your expenses paid for in this way. At the same time, of course, as you are the Secretary of State, the minister responsible for this decision, and are going to be out there taking the money away at a time, of course, when, you have had inflation-busting pay rises for MPs over the past 15 years. They've been done very well after the last 15 years. I think their money's increased broadly, I think, from about 67,000 in 2010 to 91,000 now as an MP. And of course, if you can't see that coming around the corner, you do have to wonder why, they haven't got better advisors or in frontline politics. As you say, the fact that Nigel Farage and others are saying they're not going to take the money would, I think, show the problem in all of this.
Yeah, you got Rupert Lowe, the Reform UK member for Great Yarmouth. He's not even taking his salary. He's handing all the money to local causes. Now, that kind of altruism in politics, we don't see enough of, I think. If you're a multi-millionaire, you know, arguably you can use your salary to help other people, your parliamentary salary, that is. And certainly, I don't think you should be claiming all these expenses. And this business with Liz Kendall, £3,182 claimed it. I mean, it feeds in again uncomfortably, doesn't it, into, you know, Free Gear Keir and his scrounging cabinet crew, all of whom seem to be very keen on freebies, not paying for things, getting funded by others. Again, generally speaking, you know, the Free Gear Keir saga, which of course is nowhere near over, did not play well with the electorate. Then we learnt that Angela Rayner was at it, that Rachel Reeves was at it. They're all getting freebies, free clothes, and now this. Keir Starmer ought to try to do something about this, because the image being projected is one that will not play well with the electorate.
Absolutely. And the insane thing, I think, from Labour's first 4 months in power has how much political capital they haven't spent it. They've squandered it, you know, silly causes. And I think, obviously, coming off the back of what happened with Louise Haigh on Thursday night, the fact that Starmer still has questions to answer in all of this, and I very much doubt he will, but he probably ought to answer some of those on Thursday when he gives his big reset speech, you know, plan for change, etc. I think shows, again, the Labour government, you know, getting to grips with what it actually means to be in office and having, you know, cut from the sideline for a lot of the past 14 years. You might have thought some of their preparation in government, some of their work for government would be in better shape than it now seems to be, particularly when so many of them are making basic elemental mistakes and also seemingly commissioning endless reviews as well, one every 2.5 days they've been in office.
I noticed, talking of his reset speech, you know, which is a panic measure. He's doing it because they're in so much trouble, because so far they've been nothing but a disaster. So he wants to draw a line on all of that and say, let me tell you about my 5 sacred missions. Well, one of the sacred missions that he seems to have quietly dropped is the ambition to be the nation in the G7 nation with the biggest growth, the biggest economic growth. I'm pretty certain if we're not 7th, we're 6th or something. We're nowhere near at the top of those charts. So what has he done? He's extracted that ambition from his 5 sacred missions. In other words, it isn't in there. And the other thing that isn't in there, which is just bizarre, to be honest with you, is anything about controlling our borders, anything about the migrant crisis, which gets almost comically worse by the day. So what he's doing is he's sort of he's selecting that which he cannot fix and just extracting it, which is no good, is it?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think that, look, the danger is he's going to fall into the same trap as Rishi Sunak in all of this, and it's going to end up sort of some slight technocratic measures based on self-justifying means that they've chosen. And the danger is, of course, is that the electorate will look at that and think that isn't what we wanted, that's not what you promised. And it seems, as you say, Kevin, you know, very different rhetoric to what we were promised 18 months ago when the missions were first let out. The Labour Party went into the election determined not to commit news, determined not to say too much. And now, of course, we're in government, we're learning about the shifting of the goalposts, having this new measure of living standards instead. We wait to see what's going to happen on Thursday. But, you know, I have to say I'm not too enthusiastic about many Keir Starmer speeches, and I don't think this one will be that much different.
No, exactly. But it does indicate some kind of panic there. Going back to Louise Haigh, what is your take on what went on? Was this a plot to get by Starmer and Morgan McSweeney, the Chief of Staff at Number 10, to get rid of an awkward left-wing minister who was proving to be more trouble than she was worth, do you think?
I certainly think there were elements of the Labour Party who had it in for Louise Haigh. Whether how much, you know, Keir Starmer himself knew is, I remain sceptical, because, of course, you know, he was the one who appointed her to the shadow cabinet in February 2020. He was the one who listened to her account of what went on and said it was okay. Now, maybe she told him a different story to what she was revealed last week. But I do think that, you know, whatever happens, the soft left and the Blue Party right now is mourning the loss of someone they saw as the kind of main leader in cabinet. So obviously, Heidi Alexander is very much not in that mould as the replacement Transport Secretary. And I don't think by any means, you know, people will forget what went on here. And I'll be waiting to see her next moves on the backbenches with interest.
Yeah, I mean, I was at the end of last week and over the weekend, I was beginning to form the impression that, in fairness to Keir, I hate saying that, but in fairness to Keir, there were elements of her story he did not know. So personally, I'm not that against the idea of giving someone a second chance, you know, the American way. This was an offence committed back in 2010, was it, or something like that? 10 years
14.
ago. 10 years ago. And she hasn't offended since, so rehabilitation of offenders. I'm not necessarily that much against the idea of giving someone a second chance. But the word is that Keir Starmer got rather annoyed because having given her the break in terms of one offence, there's more to the story than meets the eye.
Yeah, I think that's probably a lot of people's assessment of it. I would say, though, that I do think he still has got questions to answer, and I will be interested to see how he deals with those. Now, it may be, as you just said, Kevin, but I'm imagining he is going to be reluctant to be drawn on what went on in those conversations between him and Louise Haigh. But the fact is, of course, either it was good enough in February 2020 or some facts hadn't emerged and she wasn't truthful. We wait to see what happens. You've heard partial accounts of both sides. We know it was a very kind of quick resolution on Thursday evening, and then obviously it was announced at 6 a.m. on Friday morning. But I think that, people have all got this slightly mixed up, and so we wait to see with interest if there's any going to be further clarification, or whether, of course, this reset is a panic measure, as you say, and we'll be talking about that instead.
As I say, I'm all for the principle of giving people a second chance. However, if you're the Prime Minister, maybe you've got this Secretary of State that you know has got a criminal offence to her name, albeit 10 years ago. The politic thing to do, the wise thing to do, is probably to pass her over, isn't it, and give the gig to someone else, don't you think? So his judgment, I guess, is in question here.
And also, I think she was shadow policing minister for a number of years. It's amazing it didn't come out sooner. I'm told the story's been doing the rounds for a while. I think what was so telling, was the reports from some of her ex-colleagues who suggested this was part of a repeat pattern or something. That, I think, is what was so, did for her. Because, let's be honest, would the police really have investigated a one-off events? It seems very unlikely. So, I think it will be, I think everyone was all in favour of another chance. The key thing, of course, is if you say to someone, tell me everything, and they don't tell you everything, at that point it becomes a matter of trust and integrity, doesn't it? And it's difficult to work with a person like that.
It certainly is. James, good to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time. James Hill there, political correspondent of The Spectator.